The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Welcome back to the K4Wins handicapping show here, along with Case Kiefer, executive director. He's the chief editor out there, Las Vegas Sun. He's the man we really lean on because he is there at ground zero. Of course, Kip Kiefer, yes, that's his dad. He does all kinds of great radio shows. He does stuff here on Tony Kurre Radio, does stuff on Jocks, does stuff on Talk 99.5. Of course,
today, as a matter of fact,
the starting
2 to
lineup.
6. Don't miss it.
Yeah, another show going on today. We got the starting lineup going on. Tomorrow morning from 10:30, 11 o'clock, we'll have a very special show getting ready for the playoff games. He joins executive director of the Birmingham Racecourse Casino, and, of course, Kai Gregory, who's been in the business for a long period of time, as well as myself, doing radio now for 40 years, and having worked at ESPN and know a little bit about gambling, at least the being on the losing side more so than the winning side. And that's why I'm so happy to have these three pros around me every single week. All right, all four bye teams got beat. And I know Kip will have something to say about that, about the committee.
I'm over it. I am not. I'm getting labeled as a malcontent complainer, and I don't really understand that, because all I'm doing is what I feel like is my responsibility to point out weaknesses in this very ill-conceived system. But I have no axe to grind. Let's just play football.
Well, and we got a 3, 4, 5, and 6 right now, and what people are saying is they're trying to spin it. And I don't know if they're trying to do it for the committee's fault or not, but they're saying, hey, listen, maybe it would have been better off not to have a bye week.
Absolutely. I've said that all along. Let's do a straight tournament. Put 16 teams into it, just like the NCAA. 1 against 16, 2 against 15. They did the bye thing, and I'll say this and I'll shut up. They did the bye thing as a reward for the conference championships, because those are cash cows, and they were trying to protect those games. With an expanded playoff, you don't need a conference championship game. In the NFL, when you clinch your division, you don't have to beat the second place team before you go into the playoffs to win officially your division. In the expanded playoff, conference championships are obsolete, and they do not want those to go away, because they're a big cash producer, and TV's running the show here. End of story.
Yeah, conference champions 0-5 in the playoffs in their first year. So, yeah, certainly some things to work out here. Case Kiefer joins us in the upper left-hand corner here in Las Vegas. And I know a lot of people are standing by the sports books watching some of the games come in. Of course, a lot of those games decided by double digits. What is obviously Vegas happy, because you got more games to gamble on. And normally when you're talking about Super Bowls, and the bigger the game, the more the money is bet on that game, because you got more eyeballs on those individual games. Now you got a game coming up on Thursday and Friday, 2 of the biggest games in college football history. What's Vegas feel about everything, and how's it gone so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think more action is always a good thing. And I don't know, at some point we're going to hit a tipping point. Maybe we're here now, but sports betting's popularity has just obviously been on the incline for the last several years. So, I mean, I know all these games are meaning really big business. And I certainly think, I guess going back to my preamble last week, I think these games were mostly pretty good for the house. I kept saying it doesn't matter, but the 4 sides I said were the sharp sides of taking money. They all covered, they all won. Luckily, I was on 3 of them. But, you saw the teams that people were really getting behind, that the masses. I'm sure the recreational books really cleaned up on this latest round of the playoffs, because none of those teams came through. I thought it was a good round. I enjoyed it. I remember last week saying that I thought it was kind of classic college football in the first round, with a bunch of blowouts and people were overreacting. I thought this was classic football in kind of the ironic way, because the one game that people were saying, oh, might be the de facto national champion, the one supposed championship, the one game that couldn't miss, was a complete sleeper. And then I thought all the other 3 games were compelling in their own ways, and competitive, and fun to watch. So, yeah, I enjoyed the last round. I think we have 2 pretty good matchups here. So I think this should be fun to get to the end. And it's interesting, our first Final Four in the top 12 are teams that never would have had a chance to compete for the national championship in any previous years. So
very, very poignant.
Yeah, a lot like I think Ohio State won that first year of the 4-team playoff, and they were the number 4. So I guess when we switch formats, it comes in handy, and a new team wins it. It's going to be like that this year.
It is kind of amazing, too. You got Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, Texas. I mean, you got 4 blue bloods, which, everyone always loves. And obviously with this blue bloods, you got a bigger fan base and more alumni associations to bet on games like that. And so I'm not saying down the road we won't have a 12 seed make it in, or an Arizona State or a Boise State type of team. It's still going to be really rough because even with a bye week, you're going to have to win 2 or 3 ball games in a row in order to win a national championship. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but it does take care of the whole idea of, hey, listen, if we are a mid-major team and we go undefeated, we deserve to be playing for something outside of conference championship, and you will be. If you're undefeated now, it's just you're wondering if people are going to start scheduling Southeastern Louisiana State every single weekend just to get an easy schedule, because it appears by going undefeated, you will be playing in those 12 teams. Now, will everyone just start taking cupcakes? I don't know, because I think one of the great things about college football are those Chick-fil-A matchups and some of those huge Peach Bowl. Some of those early matchups in college football are fantastic, and that's what makes college basketball so good. I think they've done a wonderful job at doing all these coaches versus cancer tournaments and all these different things. We got Duke versus North Carolina. They don't have to play each other once or twice. They can play as many times as they want. And next thing you know, it turns out to be really good for the sport. So I think that's going to be interesting. All right, Kai, first of all, how we do on this past week? K4Wins.com, K4Wins.com. How do we do this past week? And then get your thoughts on these 4 final teams we've got.
All right. So, well, we ended the year 425, 240, and 24.
Awesome.
So not bad. 425 wins, 240 losses. This year we started out Wednesday 3-1, yesterday 5-0. So we're 8-1 on the new year. If you go and look at the site, it's going to show you our new year, what our record is now year to date, which we've had 2 days. And then it also shows you the previous year right below it on there. So starting off pretty good, 8-1. Hopefully we've got 3, 4, 5 winners for you again today. It's interesting you brought up basketball, because I don't know if you remember when Hurley, after they went out to their first tournament this year, said, I don't think I'm doing one of these again. I'm not going somewhere where I'm playing 3 games. I'll do head-to-head. I'm doing this, which I thought was kind of interesting. But, you're talking about Arizona State. Let's be honest, we're one targeting call away. That is called in every game this year. That's targeting. Now, I didn't think it was targeting. I still don't think it's targeting. But that was called targeting in every game this year. They call that targeting. We have Arizona State in the Final Four.
You had a 4th and 13th play that had to happen too. So I mean, there was a couple of different ways to look at that game too. And I mean, Arizona State. Listen, I mean, I'll be the first one to admit that when 17-3, I'm thinking, here we go again, another blowout. I mean, it was just, but if you're a college football fan and you are better, you realize that there's a reason why there's 60 minutes in most of these games.
And I'm telling you what, anybody that talks bad about Cam, let's be honest, Scatterboo is the only reason Arizona State was in that game. I mean, he had 142 yards rushing, 101 yards receiving. He threw a 46-yard touchdown pass. He's puking on the sidelines coming in. I mean, that's what you want to see. That's what college football is supposed to be about, not the NIL, not pay me more money, not jumping ship. I'm glad to see that they're talking about they're going to change the playoffs. I think they may reseed. They're talking about maybe reseeding next year versus going through the way they're doing it this year, some of that. But yeah, it's also great that we have 5, 6, 7, 8 in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 9 through 12 are out. And you have 5, 6, 7, 8. I thought that, we talked on here and Kip and I were kind of in agreement. I thought, okay, if Stockton is this, then maybe Georgia has a chance. But I was completely flabbergasted by the defensive scheme that Kirby Smart came up with. You're knowing Riley Leonard is going to run every single time it gets down to a thing they have to have yards. It's going to be Riley Leonard. And they never stopped him. Maybe once. I mean, they did not have the correct if they had a spy on him. It was horrible. I've always called him Kirby dumb anyway, especially after the fake punt, after calling timeout against Alabama years ago when Alabama was lined up in a punt safe defense and he still faked the punt. Just like Lane Kiffin last night. Oh, my God. You've got one of the best offenses in the country. I've got an idea on 4th down. Let's line up for a fake a fake field goal and fake it and let your quarterback throw almost what should have been a pick 6. I don't understand that one. And as far as the other game, Ohio State, if they play that way, nobody can beat them. I personally think Stark's going to come out, and I love the misdirection that Sarkisian uses on offense. I think that might be the only way to slow the Ohio State defense down right now. That defense is playing extremely well. Yes, the offense is playing well. Who's going to stop Smith? I mean, they asked him after the game, who can stop you? And he smiles at nobody. And he's not wrong.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too is four of these teams have obviously the four best defenses out of the top six teams in college football, and that goes without saying. Georgia was certainly one of those teams. Yeah, it's funny too because you see a lot of stats all of a sudden, and I didn't realize this going in, and I probably should have, that Notre Dame, their turnover ratio, they're more than like 42 or 43 points better than any other team in college football in turnover ratios as far as in turning those into points, which, really makes you kind of scratch your head because, I mean, turnovers are the great equalizer, and I hate turnovers because you could have one team that's so much better than another, but if they lose the turnover battle, they're probably going to lose the football game, but we don't play best 2 out of 3. Notre Dame's been getting it done all season long, and then you've got Georgia, and I saw that one crazy stat where they had 20 turnovers this time for the first time in something like 13 years or something. I didn't realize Georgia had turned the ball over that much. But finally, and I will say this, all I heard about was this quarterback gunner, and we talked about it on our last show, that it wasn't that far of a step off, that the quarterback, had a lousy season all season long for Georgia, and that it wasn't that big of a fall off, and that this kid was a 4-star recruit. And it's not going to be much of a. It is just a huge difference when you're not taking those first team snaps all week long, and you're not doing it for 2 and 3 years. It's just a big difference, and Georgia certainly saw that. And again, I mean, Georgia's defense is always going to play well, but that they were trying to build up that quarterback in the first half, saying he made all the throws, he did all those things, but ultimately he just could not get out of the way of Notre Dame. Notre Dame's defense, I don't know. Let me ask you this, Case, or Kip, because I want to get both your thoughts on this. Did Notre Dame's defense look that good because Georgia's offense looked that bad, or was Notre Dame's defense just that good? Case?
I was going to let Kip go, but I mean, I've realized the last few weeks I'm way higher on Notre Dame than everyone else. Maybe it will now even out. I mean, I don't even think they played a great game, but I mean, really, they're just kind of rolling in every facet. I mean, if you looked at the numbers, Notre Dame's defense was off the page. And then, of course, you get, which I've really gotten tired. I think the longer the college football season is, the more I get tired of, they ain't played nobody. Look at the schedule. I mean, going into some of those games, Army and Navy, we're talking these are the best Army and Navy teams in 20 years. Then they blow them out, and all of a sudden, they weren't any good. It wasn't a good game. I mean, there are signs that Notre Dame was excelling in just about every area. And I think you kind of saw this in this Georgia game, which wasn't their best effort, but they had other parts of their roster pick them up where there weren't any. So I lean towards, Notre Dame's defense is that good. I think you can make a case that it's playing better than any of the Final Four, and maybe that's what carries them to the championship.
They carried. It should be a great game between Notre Dame and Penn State, and I thought it was interesting too because regardless of who won that game, because it got postponed for a day, Penn State was going to be a 1.5-point dog to either team, Georgia or Notre Dame. Now looking at that, you can certainly make an argument that should be a little bit higher than that. But your thoughts on that, Kip? Notre Dame, the real deal, huh?
I guess, but to say Notre Dame's defense shut them completely down. The second drive, Georgia had an 11-play drive and was on the 17-yard line, 3rd and 2, and Etienne gets hit with a perfect shot. Lose a fumble for the first time in his career. Then you have the unbelievable call on the play to Arian Smith where Georgia gets the ball to the 11-yard line. They call a penalty on a guy that's not even dressed out for Georgia for having his arm on the too close to the sideline. Where the stupid zebra trailing the play runs into him. That's a 15-yard penalty. That is absolutely ridiculous.
They had the camera on that guy at the end of the game. I felt so
Porter
sorry
Jones.
for that kid. Because
he hasn't played all year. He's in jeans and his jersey.
He will never play. What are you talking about? He will never play. He will never play. I was like, what the heck is this guy? I thought it was some kid's son or something. I thought it was the coach's boy or something. I was like, that kid is like a foot slower than anyone else.
And do you guys realize Notre Dame scored 17 points in 46 seconds, the end of the first half and the opening kickoff of the second half? 46 seconds, they got 17 points. In the other 59 minutes and 16 seconds of that game, they got 6. Georgia won 10-6 in that space, but Georgia's complete self-destruction. Georgia beat themselves in that game. Kirby Smart's decision to drop Stockton back 6-3. Georgia had the game right where they needed it. The only way Georgia was going to win that game was an ugly defensive struggle, and Georgia's defense had Notre Dame's offense throttled. They didn't have a lot of yards. Georgia gave that game away, completely pissed it away with bad preparation. They had 5 weeks to get some kind of serviceable offense for Stockton to not beat themselves, and they absolutely beat themselves, and it's just a disgraceful performance.
I agree. I mean, no one's going to toast the Notre Dame offense, but to write off, I mean, I guess this is where Kip and I diverge. I mean, this is Georgia. They're supposed to be like the current Alabama. They had 4.6 yards per play. Georgia.
Oh, it was terrible.
Like Akron talking about. I mean, Notre Dame's defense was pretty. I don't care if it's Gunnar Stockton back there. I don't care if it's
if I said like I was dissing the
Notre Dame's defense stepped up a little bit there.
Well, let me say I was not dissing there. I think Notre Dame did what they needed to. The idea is to win the game. Notre Dame did exactly what they needed to do to win the game. They forced turnovers. They played solidly. They did not turn the ball over themselves. I just thought Georgia's preparation was terrible. I thought their in-game strategy was horrible, and it was just a disgraceful debacle by a team that, like you said, has put itself on a pedestal of a high standard, and they did not live up to that yesterday at all.
Yeah, the offsides. We didn't even mention. Sorry, the offsides. We didn't even mention that was the final nail in the coffin at the end.
Yeah,
that was pretty bad.
We just should that the 15-yard penalty at the beginning of the ball game. We probably should have known that something was going to be up with that ball game. It was just, it was just weird the way that.
Well, do you know the Georgia kicker only failed to kick it out of the end zone 4 times all year, and 2 of those times resulted in a 70-yard return off by Alabama on the opening kickoff to start that game, and that ridiculous first half where Georgia got behind 30-7. And then we saw what happened when he came up a yard short of getting it in the end zone this time. It's those little details, because Georgia's kick coverage team, who didn't really have to cover a kick all year, absolutely, to let that kind of game be determined by a 99-yard kickoff return where they weren't even competitive about getting him to the ground. They have Cash Jones, a running back, tried to wrestle him out of bounds. He's the only guy who even had a shot. It was just a horrible breakdown in so many areas by Georgia. And give Notre Dame credit. They came in with a good plan and executed and didn't make mistakes and won the game, and they're rightfully moving on.
And they say it's a game of inches, and now we know why. Let's go to an early look here. Really, it's not really an early look as we do this game here on this Friday, because we're inside a week here of the semifinal games here, Notre Dame and Penn State. We've talked about that. Ohio State, Texas. We can make a de facto idea that this may perhaps the national championship game. Now, all of a sudden, Texas is catching 6 against Ohio State squad. And, Kai, you brought this up. If Ohio State plays like they have so far in the playoffs, no one's beating this team.
Yeah, but I don't know why, but I think that Stark, the way he gets his teams moving and the way they counter on some of their runs, I really like that. Again, it doesn't matter what they do like that. I think Ohio State's playing very well, and if they play like that, they're going to win, and they're probably going to cover. Texas has been so methodical in the way they've done things. But you see, if you look at Arizona State and the points that Arizona State scored, how much better is Ohio State's offense? I mean, again, they have 4 guys that are going to play on Sundays, maybe 6, but 4 for sure, including a freshman that, good grief, has just gone off for 2 straight games in the playoffs. So you see what they did to Oregon. Now, I do think Texas' defense is better than Oregon, but right now I have a very hard time doing anything but playing Ohio State in that game.
Traditionally speaking, Case too, it seems like as we get longer into the tooth, the lines seem to get tighter, and you would think the lines would get smaller, but sometimes they don't. So when all of a sudden you see a Texas squad that pretty much has been the favorite throughout this run, now all of a sudden they're catching 6 points. How does Vegas look at that?
Yeah, this is kind of a challenge for me. I don't know. I might be long-winded here. I guess I'm kind of the opposite of what Kai said. I haven't bet this game. I doubt I will bet this game. But for me, at this price, it's just handicapping 101. It can only be Texas or pass. I talked about this on the starting lineup, so hopefully if people are watching both, I'm not repeating myself too much. But last week in my my weekend betting column, I always write a look-ahead line, and I said there was one that just super stood out in the college football playoff. I was the hypothetical lines. Ohio State was only a 1.5 point favorite against Texas. I thought that was ridiculous. I said, if they both win, you got to play that. Of course, I didn't end up playing it. I'm so mad at myself now. But that just shows you, I mean, there's money going into those markets. People are betting it. That was the perception, is that Ohio State was a point better than Texas going into last round. Obviously, Texas had their struggles, though I think that score is a little bit misleading. They kind of did the Texas thing they do all year. I mean, they were in total control, and it's like I guess methodical, like Kai put it, I agree with, is the way Sark is, but also I just like they get a lead and they just are like squirrels. They try to bury it and quit playing early all the time. Maybe they don't do that here. Ohio State has looked unbelievable. I totally agree. If they win, if they play like they did the last 2 games, no one's beating them. But to jump from 1.5 to now as high as 6.5, I mean, that's a huge move off of one sample size. That being said, this has been something that's killed me time and time again as a bettor, and I think it's a lot of people that do it the way I do. When you get these just juggernaut teams at the end of the year that are just absolutely rolling, if you're like a true historic outlier, it's tough to price them the right way. So I feel like I've been the guy that's been betting against these teams that are just a freight train and throwing money away. I feel like it's been a little while since it's happened in college football, but I know like for sure 2019 LSU comes to mind. I got crushed in the playoffs with them. I thought the line was too high like this than it was against Clemson and Oklahoma, and it was never in doubt. So I guess you can make the case that Ohio State has reached that level. They're just so much better than everyone else, that guys that are doing it, more data driven. We just can't get to as high of a number as this is. But I mean, this really does seem out of whack. At no other point this season when these two teams meet was this going to be a 6.5 point line as high as we have right now. I mean, most of the season, Texas would have been the favorite. From a talent perspective, there's very few teams that match up with Ohio State's $20 million roster, but I think Texas is certainly one of them. And I think in some key areas, I think this game's really could, if you're looking from a Texas perspective, in the trenches. I mean, Ohio State, the one area coming into this playoff where I wasn't so sure about was their offensive line. It's been great, but they're still super thin there. They're playing a couple backups. Texas, I mean, they got 8 guys on the defensive line they run in. Probably 4 of them are going to end up getting drafted. So if they can draw up something there. And then their offensive line's been up and down all year. Obviously, they haven't been able to run the ball very well. But Georgia took some of their soul away in that first game. I mean, they were like a runaway favorite to win the whatever that award is called for the best offensive line. I mean, they got probably 2 first-round picks on the offensive line too. So in the trenches, I think you can make a case for Texas. And it's hard to say now with as good as Will Howard looked, but I still have in the back of my mind, being a Kansas fan, especially and a Kansas State hater, I've seen this Will Howard story a lot of times where he's just absolutely on fire. And you're like, oh my God, this guy's so good. How are we going to stop him? And then he has a stinker a week or 2 later. He's not the most consistent. I think, and I know Quinn Ewers is embattled, and a lot of people are up and down on him, rightfully so. But I think Quinn Ewers is top level. There is no doubt in my mind is better than Will Howard. So I see a route to Texas being competitive here. For me, at this number, it could only be Texas or pass. But like I said, teams like Ohio State have gotten the best of me in the past. So I'm trying my hardest not to end up betting this one. If it gets to 7, I might not be able to resist, though.
K4Wins.com, K4Wins.com. We hit over 63%, over 400 winners in the season. K4Wins.com. Check out our website and get all of our plays for free. Kip, and it's really interesting because now we've had all this stuff to look at, all these games to look at. We know exactly what everyone is. We know where the leadership is. Are you one of those guys that looks at one of these offensive? I think a lot about college hoops. It seems like there's always a team, and it usually has to go with one great hot point guard who takes a team 3 or 4 deep, and all of a sudden this team comes out of nowhere and all of a sudden starts winning, beating Dukes and beating North Carolinas. Do you see that in college football? Are you looking at Ohio State and how they played recently, or are you looking back at the Ohio State Michigan film and saying, wait a minute, there's a way to beat this team?
Well, I told you guys last week, I felt like, or before, I don't know when it was last week. We've done so many shows lately. I don't even know when it was, but it was before the Tennessee game that I thought Tennessee was embarking on Mission Impossible because Ohio State was getting so much criticism and there was such bad feeling about that Michigan game. I think it's galvanized this team and gotten them focused and having their mind on their business. But that was the explanation. I don't think anybody could have gone in and been in Tennessee's position and come out. I think the Oregon game's different. I believe the bye is a negative thing for these teams that don't play for 34 days. Football is a game of routine. You don't take 34 days, 1 day short of 5 weeks off. Oregon was not prepared, not sharp. Case hits on something very interesting here. Will Howard being on fire. When Jeremiah Smith is 15 yards behind the defensive back, all he's got to do is throw it out there somewhere, and Smith is going to go get it. It isn't like he made this precision, tight window passing play. I give him credit. He's been great in these 2 games, but he's got a lot of weapons around him. And I also put a lot of emphasis, Tony, on what a lot of people don't talk about, and it's another another one of the real criticism I have of this playoff structure. Texas, of course, played their first game against the lowest ranked team at home in Austin. Then they went to Atlanta and played Arizona State, who was the second lowest ranked team by the committee themselves, not in my estimation. I'm talking about their numbers, although they were a bye team, which is, again, the absurdity of the situation. Now, where is Texas and Ohio State playing? In Jerry World in Dallas. So as the 5 seed, they get to play 2 de facto home games. Yep. Nobody's talking about that. Ohio State is going into hostile territory. And I think that's a factor. A lot of people think I'm insane, but I really think where the games are played matters a lot. And I think that's another advantage. Case laid out a really good case, pun intended, for Texas here having a path to victory. And I think playing in their backyard only enhances that. So I think we're in for a hell of a game here. I think Ohio State's getting a lot more credit for, a game at home that I knew they were going to win. Anybody going in there was going to be in big trouble. And I'm not that impressed with the Oregon win. Oregon gave up a boatload of points to Penn State. We had an indicator that Oregon's defense was not very good, and boy, did Ohio State exploit that right away. So I'm still not absolutely gaga over Ohio State.
All right, so with that being said, Kip, let's keep the spotlight on you. Who do you got in your 2 ball games here? Notre Dame -1.5 against Penn State, 47 the total, and 53.5, and Ohio State -6. Give me a winner on both sides. And again, we don't have to pick both sides. We're looking for winners here. We want to have winners.
Yeah. I just made kind of laid out the case. If it's a 6.5 or 7 point spread, you got to take Texas here. Mm-hmm. I know everybody's caught up in the hype, but Texas is a maddening team. They've got. I declared last week, I thought they probably had the best roster in the country. Ohio State certainly is the chief rival there, but you talk about the de facto national championship game. I believe this one is it, because if Texas plays a 60-minute game, they have the personnel to beat anybody. But we see these kind of lapses and just weird. They go up 16 in the fourth quarter and give up Scatterboo's touchdown pass. He just threw that up for grabs, and the secondary didn't the receiver broke to the ball while the Texas defender just kind of stood there dumbfounded. Just some weird stuff in that game. But I think if Texas plays a full game and plays to their capability, you can't give Ohio State 6.5 or 7 points. I don't think this one's going to be a blowout. The other game, flip a coin. It's a tough game for me to call. I don't think either team is that impressive offensively. Both of them were kind of very mirror images of each other in terms of being fundamentally sound and playing real good defense. I would lean Notre Dame because they're kind of the hotter team right now. I still am kind of doubtful about Penn State. I don't put any stock in their win over Boise, so I'll take Notre Dame. But I think it's a coin flip.
Kai, what's your thoughts?
I love that you let me go before Case, because I was going to bring up, it's going to be interesting to see his pick, since he's been the one of us that's been on Notre Dame and on Penn State talking about them for the last
that's
6
right.
weeks, about how he values them more than everybody else. So it's going to be interesting to hear his take on that game. I would bet Notre Dame in a heartbeat in this game. I would go with touchdown Jesus, just because of touchdown Jesus. That's really the only reason.
Right.
It's pretty much it. I just way too early for me to really want to say on that game. Texas, Ohio State, I would take Ohio State over their team total. I think it's 28.5 right now. It's probably going to go as high as 31. Even if Texas plays them really well, I think that's going to be a high scoring game. But I don't care. I don't see Texas being competitive on a fast track. You can say it's home game or not, but on a fast track on the turf in Jerry World, if Ohio State plays anything like they have, and I agree, I can't stand Will Howard. I do not think he's a good quarterback at all. But when you've got guys that just run past everybody, and you can throw up 10 a game, and they just got to run under 5 of them to get you past your team total, okay, because nobody has stopped Smith yet. And I don't think, and Kip just brought it up, we saw what Texas let happen on a 230-pound running back throwing a ball up. So what's a quarterback going to do? Throwing it up to his stud receivers. I don't think Texas has the secondary. Don't get me wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I can't stand Ohio State. And I like Stark. I think he's a pretty good coach. I do think he's going to have some offensive schemes that are going to make Texas on offense look better than the last two teams that Ohio State played. And Oregon had one of the most productive offenses in the country. But I would go Ohio State over their team total. And right now, I would take Notre Dame.
All right, Case, you can't have Notre Dame and Penn State because they're playing each other. Who you got?
Yeah, I guess opposite of the last couple of weeks, even the beginning, I really agree with just about Kip and I's thoughts on these games. I think mirror each other. I agree with a lot of what he said. I mean, if I have to go outright, who's going to win? It's hard to pick against Ohio State right now, so I would say Ohio State, Notre Dame. But I think Kip hit on something that is big to me, and I will go to war for. I know people will roll their eyes and say it's ridiculous, but from a qualitative standpoint, I gave Texas a point for home field advantage here. You could say that's ridiculous. It's really a neutral site. Maybe the surface, like Kai said, will benefit Ohio State. But I know some of the sharpest guys in the world that are making millions of dollars doing this. Miles traveled, how close you are to home. It doesn't matter if it's a neutral site. It matters. So I do think you give Texas a little bit of an advantage for home field. I only had this line at 3.5. Obviously, it's way higher than that. Normally, any other time during the year, I would be betting on it. But I'm trying to have some restraint, especially because from a futures betting perspective, if it's, I might give up a finger if it could be Texas Notre Dame. That's really what I'm hoping for. I would crush all the futures if it's those two teams. If it's not, I have nothing on Penn State and Ohio State, unfortunately. So, yeah, just straight numbers-wise, I think all the values on Texas, you would have to bet Texas. I just can't quite pull the trigger and say they're going to win outright. I agree with Kai, and what concerns me, when I was going through the advantages Texas has, you realize I didn't mention any of the skill players that are out on the edges of the field. I mean, that's clearly Ohio State's domain. But, if Texas can muddy this up, if they can actually play a full 60 minutes, which I've been the number one defender of them all year. And I think some of their wins have aged pretty well, too, by the way. I know no one wanted to give them any credit for what they did at Michigan. No one did that to Michigan this year. I know that was early in the year. Even the Florida game, I mean, I know they're playing a third-string Ivy League quarterback, but, no quarterback's worth like 18 points or whatever. They beat them by like 4 touchdowns. So I think we have seen flashes where Texas is the team that's promised. If they can somehow put it together, I have some hope this is a close game. As far as Notre Dame, Penn State, I'm basically right on the number. I made this Notre Dame -2. So I guess -1.5. I have to go Notre Dame just ever so slightly. I think I've said it before on the show, but yeah, I have been really high on these two teams. And I think the disconnect between me and everyone else is, I admit, right away, they are not the most explosive teams. Neither of these teams are going to blow you away with their explosive plays. They just do everything else so well. They don't really have any other, black marks on their resume. And even Penn State, ironically, I think the reason they beat Boise State is because they hit some of those explosives. They got Omari Evans behind the defense for that second touchdown, the big play to Tyler Evans. So if it comes down to explosives, Penn State, I think, has been trending up in that department, but neither team really does it. And if it's a tough, hard-nosed game like we expect, low scoring, I ever so slightly lean Notre Dame. So I guess officially I'd go Notre Dame, Ohio State for the title, but God, I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's Notre Dame, Texas, and I can only bet Texas.
There you go. K4Wins.com, K4Wins.com. We do soccer, we do college hoops, NFL. Our final week is going to be very, very interesting because there's a lot of value there if you know where to look on the final week. Of course, some teams still have a shot at making the playoffs, including my Cincinnati Bengals. We'll see if they get it done this weekend. And, of course, then we'll go full board NFL as well as some college football and histories and some future bets, too. I'm going to get into some prop stuff as well as we get a little closer to all that NFL action as well. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you, man.
Okay, guys.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.